Each exchange shapes the final verdict. Every camera uncovers reality, grasping your legal protections, enforcing true justice.
Afternoon. Nice car. Where'd you get it?
Afternoon, officer. It's mine. Just filling up.
$500,000 rolls. Don't see guys like you in one. You borrowed or steal it?
No, sir. Paid for and registered in my name.
What kind of hustle pays for this?
It's called a salary. I'm a superior court judge.
Yeah, right.
I'm not resisting. I'm
You're falsely
standing
accusing
still.
me. Hands on your...
The body cam footage starts at a gas station pump just after 9:17 p.m. A black man stands beside a luxury SUV, receipt still warm in his hand. 3 minutes later, a patrol unit pulls in behind him. Lights off, engine running, and a simple stop quietly begins a lawsuit that will cost the city nearly $14 million. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Officer Daniel Rourke had already decided something wasn't right before his cruiser rolled to a stop. He'd been on the force 12 years, long enough to trust what he called his street sense, the instinct he mentioned often in reports and roll call briefings. The department praised him for being proactive. Supervisors liked his numbers, stops, searches, suspicious vehicle checks. On paper, it looked like vigilance. From inside the cruiser, Rourke watched the SUV at pump 6, midnight blue, oversized rims catching the fluorescent lights. He noted the out-of-state plates, the quiet way the driver moved, the tailored jacket that didn't fit the neighborhood Rourke believed he was patrolling. He keyed his radio, not for backup, just to log his location. The engine idled. His hand rested on the door handle. The man by the pump hadn't noticed him yet. He was focused on the numbers clicking upward on the screen, then unfolding the receipt with deliberate care. His name was Aaron Caldwell, 52 years old, and after a 12-hour day presiding over hearings and sentencing motions, all he wanted was to get home before his coffee went cold. He'd stopped at this gas station dozens of times before, usually unnoticed, usually unremarkable. Rourke stepped out first, boots on concrete. The body cam clicked on with a faint beep, catching the officer's reflection in the SUV's glossy door. "Evening," Rourke said, voice calm, practiced. "Mind if I ask you a couple questions?" Caldwell turned, surprised but composed. Years on the bench had trained him to read rooms quickly, to measure tone, posture, intent. He offered a polite nod. "Is something wrong, officer?" Rourke's eyes traced the vehicle again before settling on Caldwell. "Just doing my job. This your car?" The question landed heavier than it sounded. Caldwell paused, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood exactly what was being asked. He answered evenly, "Yes, it is." Rourke didn't move on. He didn't apologize. Instead, he asked again, slightly rephrased, as if repetition might produce a different truth. "You've got registration on you?" Caldwell reached into the glove compartment slowly, announcing each movement without thinking, habits learned long before he wore a judge's robe. As he handed over the documents, Rourke studied his hands, his watch, the leather interior. The SUV was paid off, the registration clean. The name matched. Still, Rourke lingered. "What do you do for work?" the officer asked, casual enough to sound harmless. Caldwell met his eyes. "I'm a judge." The word hung between them, awkward and uninvited. Rourke blinked, then gave a short, humorless laugh. "A judge," he repeated like he was tasting it. "What court?" Caldwell answered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for authority. He simply stated a fact. The shift was subtle but visible. Rourke's posture stiffened. His jaw tightened. Later, internal reviewers would note the moment, the second where suspicion didn't dissolve but recalibrated. The officer hadn't uncovered a crime. He'd uncovered a challenge. Rourke stepped back, radio crackling at his shoulder. He glanced around the gas station as if suddenly aware of the cameras mounted above the pumps, the teenager inside the convenience store pretending not to watch. He handed the documents back a little too firmly. "All right," he said, "just checking." Caldwell nodded, but the moment had already changed. What should have ended there didn't. Rourke added one more line to the stop, something unnecessary, something telling. "You know," he said, "we don't usually see vehicles like this around here." Caldwell didn't argue. He simply asked, Is there anything else, officer? Rourke shook his head and returned to the cruiser. No citation, no warning. Just a note entered into the system under field interview. A box check that would later matter more than anyone realized. Caldwell watched the patrol car pull away, the taillights disappearing into traffic. He exhaled slowly, then got into his SUV. By the time he drove off, the body cam had stopped recording, but the damage had already been done. Because that brief encounter, logged as routine, would soon be requested by attorneys, dissected by experts, and replayed frame by frame. And Officer Rourke's instincts, once praised, would become the central question in a case about power, perception, and the cost of unchecked bias. If you believe that standing up for what's right can change everything, share the story and let others know that justice can prevail. The next morning, Aaron Caldwell woke with a lingering unease. The stop had been brief, almost mundane on the surface, but the memory of Officer Rourke's gaze lingered. It wasn't just the questions or the way the officer had studied him. It was the judgment behind them, invisible but unmistakable. In his years on the bench, Caldwell had seen prejudice disguised in countless forms. Now he felt it aimed squarely at him. He poured coffee, scrolled through his emails, and saw the first alert. A local news blog had picked up a story about high-end SUV stop sparks questions in suburb. They didn't mention his name, but the story framed it as if a wealthy driver was flaunting the law. He shook his head. He wasn't wealthy. He was careful, methodical, disciplined. But for some, appearances were enough. Meanwhile, Officer Rourke returned to Precinct 12 with a quiet sense of satisfaction. He logged his stop, detailing the unusual circumstances of a black man in a luxury vehicle. In his report, he emphasized that the subject appeared out of place and noted the registration matched the driver, though he made sure to underline his personal suspicions. He knew deep down this was routine, but Rourke's instinct had told him there was more beneath the surface. Back at the gas station, surveillance footage had captured every angle. By now, the station manager had handed the video to a private investigator who had been tipped off by a concerned neighbor. The footage showed Caldwell's calm, composed movements, the officer's unnecessary second glance, the subtle tension that escalated without words. To an outside observer, it was a textbook example of bias, yet one Rourke might never admit. Within hours, whispers began to spread. Community members started sharing the blog, commenting on social media, questioning the stop. Why was he pulled over? Luxury SUV, black driver. Really? The outrage was quiet at first, simmering beneath the surface, but it was growing. And when Caldwell shared the footage with his attorney, the story became concrete, undeniable. Caldwell's attorney, Marissa Lopez, a former civil rights prosecutor, leaned back in her office chair and watched the footage again. This isn't just a traffic stop, she said. This is the kind of stop that has consequences, not just for him, but for the whole community. She paused, pointing to the moment Rourke's expression hardened after Caldwell said he was a judge. That, she said, is bias on display. Rourke, meanwhile, received a call from his sergeant. A formal complaint had been filed. He listened, expression unchanged, fingers tapping the dashboard of his cruiser. Field interview, he muttered. Routine, nothing wrong. But as he hung up, he couldn't shake a small, nagging doubt. Something about the case felt different. For the first time in years, the questions he had ignored about privilege, race, and perception started pressing in. As the week unfolded, Caldwell found himself reliving the stop in his mind, frame by frame. He thought of the way Rourke had scrutinized him, the unnecessary questions, the lingering gaze at his vehicle. The stop had been brief, yet it felt invasive, a violation of his dignity. He wondered, if he hadn't been a judge, if no one had seen the footage, would it have ended the same way? The tension escalated further when the city's internal affairs office requested a meeting with Caldwell. He arrived at the municipal building expecting a quick debrief, polite, procedural. Instead, he found himself seated across from a panel of officers, their expressions polite but detached. They asked the same questions Rourke had asked, framed as standard protocol, but Caldwell knew better. He remained calm, answering truthfully, refusing to be intimidated, while the panelers scribbled notes and exchanged subtle glances. By the end of the meeting, Caldwell left with more than just official documentation. He carried a deepening sense of responsibility. The incident wasn't just personal. It was systemic. The stop, minor as it seemed, exposed biases that many refused to acknowledge. And now, with attorneys reviewing his case, the story was about to grow far beyond a suburban gas station. Back at home, Caldwell reviewed the SUV footage one last time. He watched Rourke's eyes, the tilt of his head, the lingering suspicion that never dissipated. It wasn't just a vehicle being questioned. It was a man being judged. And as the hours ticked closer to the weekend, he realized that what had started as a minor encounter was about to become a landmark legal battle, one that could send ripples across the city and perhaps the nation. If you believe that standing up for what's right can change everything, share this story and let others know that justice can prevail. By the time Monday rolled around, the story had already begun to ripple through the city. Local news stations ran blurbs about questionable SUV stop, and online forums buzzed with speculation. Some framed it as a minor traffic stop. Others sensed something deeper, a confrontation at the crossroads of race, power, and privilege. Aaron Caldwell, still composed, felt the weight of the moment. The gas station incident, minor as it seemed in real time, had become far bigger than anyone anticipated. He reviewed the body cam footage again, this time looking for anything he might have missed. Every second reinforced the same truth. Officer Rourke's stop was not casual, not routine. It was deliberate, grounded in assumptions about who Caldwell was supposed to be based solely on the car he drove and the color of his skin. Still, his attorney, Marissa Lopez, had already drafted a formal complaint to the police department and began preparing a civil rights lawsuit. She emphasized to Caldwell that this case was bigger than him. It was a statement about accountability. "This isn't just about a luxury SUV, Aaron," she said firmly. "It's about making sure people understand that what happened to you won't happen to anyone else unchecked." Meanwhile, Officer Rourke prepared for his own series of meetings and interviews. At the precinct, his colleagues offered muted support, some cautious, some openly skeptical. Few realized the storm that was forming. Rourke had always been meticulous with his reports. He'd followed procedure, after all, but procedures, as the attorneys would argue, could hide 1,000 biases behind careful language. The first official hearing was tense. Caldwell entered the room with quiet authority. Every step, every gesture, reflected decades of legal experience. Across from him, Rourke sat rigid, pen in hand, clipboard balanced on his knees. He answered questions precisely, avoiding unnecessary detail, but the words on the paper could not erase what the video showed. Marissa Lopez laid out the case methodically. She highlighted the officer's prior complaints of unnecessary stops, the suspicious pattern of stops involving black drivers in affluent neighborhoods, and the discrepancies between Rourke's report and the actual footage. "Your Honor," she said in the courtroom-like setting of the department's internal hearing room, "what we have here is not a traffic enforcement issue. This is a matter of racial profiling, plain and simple." Rourke shifted uncomfortably. In his mind, he had only been doing his job, protecting the streets as he understood them. But when confronted with the footage in full, every pause, every glance, every lingering question he had asked took on a new significance. The tension reached a quiet peak when Lopez played the body cam footage for the panel. The room was silent, except for the low hum of the projector. Caldwell's calm demeanor contrasted starkly with the subtle aggression captured on tape. The way Rourke had studied him, the unnecessary repetition of questions, the hesitation to let him leave without comment. Even without words, the injustice was palpable. Afterward, a panel member muttered, "It's hard to argue with what we just saw." Others nodded. For the first time, the stop was no longer a minor incident in departmental records. It was undeniable evidence of bias. Outside the hearing, Caldwell faced a growing crowd. Local community leaders, journalists, and concerned citizens had gathered, drawn by the story's reach online. They asked questions, sought comments, and offered support. Caldwell answered cautiously but firmly, emphasizing the need for accountability and systemic change. "This isn't about me personally," he said. It's about making sure that what happened here doesn't happen again. The legal team quickly escalated the situation. The lawsuit, filed as a civil rights violation, requested $13.8 million in damages. The figure wasn't arbitrary. It reflected lost income, emotional distress, and the broader societal cost of racial profiling. News outlets ran with the story, framing it as a rare case where a high-ranking official had experienced the kind of scrutiny many black citizens face daily. Rourke, meanwhile, became aware of the public attention and the potential fallout. Internal memos circulated, colleagues whispered, and for the first time he felt the pressure of accountability beyond departmental review. The officer who once prided himself on street sense now faced the sharpest sense of all, the scrutiny of law, media, and a community unwilling to ignore the injustice. Months had passed since the stop at the gas station, but the story hadn't faded. It had only grown sharper, louder, and harder to ignore. Courtrooms buzzed with the anticipation of a rare civil rights case. A black judge suing a police officer for racial profiling during what should have been an ordinary traffic stop. The city watched, the media watched, and most importantly, the law watched. Aaron Caldwell sat in the front row of the courtroom, calm, deliberate, every gesture measured. He had prepared for months, reviewing every piece of evidence, every word captured on the body cam, every detail of Officer Rourke's own reports. He knew the law, but more than that, he understood the human cost of prejudice. His attorney, Marissa Lopez, whispered a final reminder before the judge entered. Today isn't just about compensation. It's about accountability. The courtroom fell silent as Judge Marlon Rivers took the bench. The air was thick with anticipation. Rourke, seated on the opposite side, appeared tense, his confident posture from the gas station incident replaced by visible unease. He had faced internal investigations, public scrutiny, and relentless media coverage, but nothing compared to the moment when the law itself would judge him. Lopez presented the case with precision. The body cam footage played again. This time for the jury, each second exposing bias that words alone could not convey. Caldwell's answers to Rourke's repetitive questions, the lingering scrutiny, the subtle undermining of his authority, all evidence of a stop motivated not by safety, but by prejudice. Rourke tried to defend himself. I followed protocol, he said, voice tight. I had reasonable suspicion. Lopez cut him off gently, firmly. Sir, reasonable suspicion does not include assumptions based on skin color. It doesn't include questioning a man's right to drive his own vehicle or his authority as a judge. This wasn't protocol, it was profiling. The jury watched silently, the weight of reality settling over the room. Outside, news vans recorded every detail, the story unfolding live on social media feeds. The city's residents debated, argued, and, in many cases, celebrated the moment. Finally, after days of testimony, cross-examination, and closing arguments, the jury retired. Hours later, they returned. The four-person stood holding the slip of paper with the verdict. We, the jury, find in favor of the plaintiff, Aaron Caldwell, and award damages in the amount of $13,800,000. The room exhaled. Caldwell remained composed, acknowledging the verdict with a slight nod. Relief and vindication coursed through him, but he didn't celebrate. He understood this was about justice, not personal triumph. The jury had sent a clear message. Racial profiling, no matter the guise, would not go unchecked. For Officer Rourke, the impact was immediate and career-defining. The city placed him on administrative leave, initiated disciplinary action, and his record reflected the jury's decision. What had once been a routine stop, framed as proactive policing, had become a permanent mark on his career, a reminder that personal bias could no longer hide behind procedure. Caldwell, meanwhile, drove away from the courthouse in the same luxury SUV, but it felt different now. The vehicle, once a symbol that had drawn suspicion, now represented more than personal property. It represented dignity restored, a system held accountable, and the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. In the weeks that followed, the case inspired others. Police departments revised training protocols. City councils debated oversight reforms. and citizens recognized that vigilance against bias was not optional. The story became more than a lawsuit. It became a lesson in accountability, courage, and the importance of using one's position to challenge injustice. And as the sun set over the city, Caldwell reflected on the journey, from gas station stop to a courtroom victory that reverberated far beyond suburban streets. Justice had prevailed, and Officer Rourke had finally faced the consequences of his actions. If you believe that standing up for what's right can change everything, share this story and let others know that justice can prevail.
True justice is an evolving process, and awareness remains your strongest shield. We appreciate your viewership and dedication to clarity.